Evening. I'd like to welcome our panel this evening that we have here today and our viewers online. Today's or this evening's conversation, it really is a conversation, is to understand the perceptual skills and play that we find or experience in our nursery school. I'd first like to welcome our panel members. We have Raeesa on my left. She's an occupational therapist. Welcome, Raeesa. We have Tammy, who's the head of our nursery school at Kailong Prep School. We have Ashleigh, who's a speech therapist. And then we have Tracy, who's the head of Bulbulia Nursery School. So welcome to everybody and welcome to the people at home. So as I said, the conversation this evening is really about the perceptual skills. What are perceptual skills and play? I think the perceptual skills, it's a buzzword that maybe teachers use. So Tammy, I'm going to start with you. What are perceptual skills?
So perceptual skills are really the skills that a child needs in place before learning can take place. So when I speak about learning, it's numeracy, reading, writing, and there are two main umbrellas, if I can call them that, when we divide perceptual skills up into auditory perceptual skills and visual perceptual skills. And I think it's important to note that your visual skills are not the physical ability to see, and your auditory skills isn't the physical ability for your ear to hear, but rather how your ear and your eyes take in that information, how your brain processes it. And so those skills are all really important before we can even get to reading, writing, and numeracy. It's important that those skills are in place.
Thank you very much. And then Tracy, the idea of play, not the play that we find at Spur or bouncing.
Absolutely. So play is an umbrella term as well, as Tammy was saying about umbrella terms for perceptual skills. Play encompasses various aspects of play. There's different types of play, from constructive play, which is where children build things. So they're creating something, making something different out of the tools or the toys that they have. There's facilitated play, which is the equipment that you give a child to play with. So for example, if you have a child in the sand pit, you can give them buckets and shapes and things that they can make little creations out of the sand. And then there is individual or solitary play, where a child is playing on their own. It can be done as a self-soothing thing. It can be done as their own interest. And then within that solitary play, children also move from playing on their own to playing alongside other children, which is known as parallel play. So they may look like they're playing together, but actually they're just playing in the same kind of space.
Are they developmental?
And they are definitely developmental. So they go in these various stages. And then they developed into a phase of cooperative play, where they actually engage with other children, where they can create rules. There can be boundaries within their play. And that's where play becomes a very social aspect in terms of a child's social development.
If I may say, I suppose with the COVID-19 and the pandemic, I'm sure many of the children that are at nursery school haven't had those opportunities to develop those skills. They've been at home for a long period of time.
Absolutely. So in a home, you generally have one child of a specific age group. They may have siblings, but then their play would be at different levels. Whereas at a nursery school, you have a whole group of children who are 3 turning 4 or 4 turning 5 or whatever the case may be. And that allows the children those opportunities to develop their social skills at the same time that they're developing their emotional skills, because you can't develop social skills without having good emotional skills. So you need to learn that it's not okay to hit somebody to take a toy away from them, or just to take a toy away. So there's a huge marrying of their social and emotional skills, which are also critical for learning. Okay. You can't learn effectively if you don't have good emotional and social skills.
And I suppose our world is going there when your businesses or corporates are having to collaborate as a team.
Absolutely. Collaboration is a huge 21st century skill. So.
Okay, thank you. Raeesa, so I just want to know the connection between your perceptual skills and your learning in the younger years. How does that connect, and why is it important?
So we look at kids. Kids' work is play. That's how they learn. That's how they grow. That's how they experience.
But not play that we might just think it's just happening.
Absolutely. So like Tracy had mentioned earlier, the different types of play. And if we look at the different types of play, they each contribute to a child's development. They each contribute to developing different skills. So if we look at something like constructive play, how does that develop something like visual perceptual skills? If I have a set of blocks, I need to touch the blocks, feel the blocks, get an understanding of its weight, its size, its color. And through learning that, we develop visual perceptual skills. And when we talk about visual perceptual skills, it's not like Tammy had mentioned earlier, not what my eyes see, but how my brain understands what I see. And a child experiences the world through their senses, through their hearing, through their vision, through their sense of touch, through their movement of their body within the environment. That gives them an understanding of what is actually going about in the world. Mm. If we look at learning, learning is essentially something new to a child. So they take in all these senses, integrate them, process them, and a lot of that is done through their visual and auditory perception to give them the concept of learning. So learning, as much as we like to think starts later on, really starts from the day that little being is born, where they start to hear, start to feel, start to move, start to touch, start to see. And interestingly enough, the visual system is the one system that is only really activated once the baby opens its eyes and looks into the world. So we need to give kids ample opportunity to play so that they can develop these skills.
All right, so then so much of our learning, especially for our nursery school children, has been through a visual stimulus with the kind of computer. Is that not helping them?
So online learning or screen time is 2D, and 2D meaning I can't see the 3D properties of something, and that's jumping a whole lot of developmental steps in terms of.
So building a puzzle on a screen is maybe not the best thing.
Very different. And if you think about it, let's take the example of a puzzle on a screen. If a child is moving a puzzle piece to fit in, often the screen auto-corrects it and moves it in. It doesn't change the shape or the direction of the puzzle piece. But if a child has to do that themselves, there's so much more skills, so many more sensory experiences that they're going to have by looking at the puzzle piece, picking it up, touching it, feeling it, getting a sense of its weight, its direction, how I need to now problem solve to move it in. Oh, actually, is it upside down? A puzzle piece on a screen is never going to be upside down. Or it's not really fitting in correctly. Now I need to think and use my spatial skills to see how is it going to move around. There isn't the concept of auto-correcting.
And frustration levels that might come with that as well.
And that's it. Frustration tolerance, delay of gratification, and then the visual skills that they're using, challenging, and using in different ways to be able to do that.
Thank you. And Ashleigh, with regards to the auditory side, in your field, our children, although they've used the screen, just learned particularly at during these last couple of months with the online learning. How's that had an impact on the auditory skills and the little ones in their formative years? What could we see long term? What could we expect long term?
Okay, well, just in a nutshell, just to give you an idea of what auditory perceptual skills are, and obviously Tammy and Raeesa have already touched on them, but it is how the brain perceives, the message or information the child is hearing. But it's more than that. It's active listening or listening for meaning. So like Raeesa mentioned with how the visual perceptual skills developed, it's the same with auditory perceptual skills. So actually hearing in utero develops from 18 weeks. Mm-hmm. And this will continue until the child, even once the child is born, these skills continue until the child's about 8 years of age. So already when the child's in utero, the child will respond obviously through movement to the mom when she reads, when she talks, when she sings to her child. So a lot of these skills that the child learns is developmental. So it's taught to them. You don't have to teach it to them. It's developed naturally.
And maybe through the play.
100%. So incidental learning and play, that is vital, and it's the best way for children to learn. And that obviously will then enhance those skills and build that confidence and increase that capacity and ability to learn. And when your child's able to learn, life is easier, learning is more enjoyable, and they also, like I mentioned, are more confident beings. So when it comes to online learning, which is obviously we've had to adjust and deal, we haven't had a choice in the matter, but I do think it's very unnatural. They're not being exposed to the outdoor environment. There's, routine structures affected. Depending on how they're learning from an auditory perspective, are they using insert earphones? Are they just relying on the speaker from the laptop? That is going to affect the sound. Yes, it's going to create distortions. It's going to affect localization of sound. So, where is the sound coming from? It's here, but I'm not, which direction is it coming from? So it's also that attention, that auditory sensitivity, hearing those sound patterns and those differences in sound. It's so unnatural. It's not normal. They ordinarily, if they were at school, they would be exposed to the outdoors. They would have playtime, to what we call white noise, which you tend to block out, obviously, but birds chirping, a phone ringing, the music playing, those are all sounds they're not going to have anymore. And I think especially in this day and age, focus is often what is needed for online learning too. And already, because it's screen time, there's so much happening. So they're already distracted because there's colors, sounds, all things happening.
Distraction.
So hugely. So you can imagine then following directions, which is an auditory task, will be hugely affected as well. So again, it depends on the child's level and skill and their exposure and their skills up until that point. Every child is different, and we know no child is perfect. But I think it's important that we encourage the development of these skills through play and through incidental learning and just everyday communication with your child. They are actually developing those sounds, those patterns, and those rhythms of language, which, I think just coming through a screen is just, it's not the way to go. So just that exposure to toys and hearing, obviously certain toys that make noise, or being able to play musical chairs at school. It's all those games that we take for granted that you actually can't do through a screen. And it's just, if it's only one child also on the other side, he doesn't have, or she doesn't have other children to interact and play with, and when maybe in terms of following directions as well, it's also difficult for kids. They might feel uncomfortable if they're not hearing properly, or when a child has processing problems, often what can help is them being seated next to a child who's strong in the class with processing skills, but now they don't have that support. So I think, although it's good for to build independence, but you also want them to have that support and comfort. If they're not too sure, they want to ask someone, or maybe they want to go to the teacher and have that one-on-one attention and get that support or that repetition. They might feel too scared to stick up their hand every 5 seconds to get that support. So you can understand that it's just, it's not the best way, and especially for children who already have difficulties in that area.
So, and what about a child that is, there's pollution in especially I think of the seasonal change at the moment, those children that have suffered with ear infections and maybe have had grommets. So would that compound?
Oh, definitely, because it can cause hearing loss depending on how badly damaged their ears have been from grommets and ear infections. So often they have distorted hearing because it sounds like they're underwater. So I think the challenge is increased, the challenge to hear. And now already it's online learning, which is quite an abstract way of learning things. And now they've got to compete with hearing difficulty. Well. And often research tells us, it's a given, when children have ear infections or have had chronic ear infections in childhood, the chances of them having an auditory processing problem are
quite high.
Very high. Yeah.
So what does processing mean?
Well, it's just an alternate name for auditory perceptual skills. So it's really, like I said, it's that active listening and being able to take in what I'm hearing and make sense of it. To make sense of it. And I think, and we've got to be able to do that and enhance those skills. And I'm not, like I said, a lot of these things happen naturally without you having to help the child. But, as parents, it's our duty to try and stimulate them and enhance them so that their lives can be easier at school.
So if for our parents at home that are watching us, if you had to give them, say, 5 skills that they could do at home, that would help their child, assist them at school, or assist them with their learning?
There's many things they can do. But the first 2 I'll always advocate, and it's easy to do, is reading. And I think we take it for granted, and I think parents forget about just going to a book, physical thing, not the one on an iPad.
I was going to say, what about just listening to an auditory story?
Look, it has purpose. I'm not saying, there's a time and place for everything, but I think we do need to go back to basics, because it's also the visual, the visual stimulation that we need. And it's important to see those letters, to see those words, to know that the language we're hearing can be in written form as well. And that's how they develop, the smallest unit that we can process, and that's sound. So those are those pre-reading skills. So a book is endless. The list is endless with what you can get from a book and learn from a book. And it's not just to, generic, boring reading. We need to be exciting. We need to have expression. We need to use different tones. different speeds at which we read, so we can entice the children, create those curious minds, make them want to enjoy reading. Because I think, kids that don't enjoy reading, I don't know, sometimes I wonder how they're being read to. It just doesn't make sense to me. Yes, and from there, I mean, you can build on their memory and their sequencing ability. So now we read a story. 2 days later, we go back. Let's talk about the story that we're reading. Tell me the events. Do you remember what happened? What do you think is going to happen next? So it's beautiful because it brings in those WH questions as well, which are always challenging for kids.
What would those be? We had to give a parent example by WH questions.
Why WH questions?
What are they?
Oh, what are they? So it would be the what, where, why,
okay.
How, have a left one, and when. Okay, but the how and the why are the abstract ones that children think 100%, but they gain that understanding through exposure. So the more you read and the more you talk to them about what those words are and you provide them the context for it, the more they understand it and then can use it and express it as well. So reading is a huge one for me, and rhyming books are wonderful to train their ears to discriminate those sounds. Rhyming books, of the Dr. Seuss books, are great. And then talking to our children, I think this is one that, generic conversation needs to go out the window. We need to really hone in on our children and interact with them to develop those conversational skills. So they learn about turn taking, they learn about pragmatics. And I think with the lives we lead at the moment, it's busy. And especially after COVID, I mean, lives have also been very stressful. And I think in the home environment tends to be quite noisy. You've got the dog barking, you've got the TV blaring, the radio's on. So there's no quiet time anymore. So I would really like to encourage that, because then you really can, get down to it and have a deep conversation with kids. And I think supper time's a great way to do this. I think we need to eat around the table. I don't think that's done too often either. And there you can, incite some creativity, because you can make it interesting, not, sure, we have the general conversations. Those are also good. We need to know how your child's really doing. But we can also create topics. So, every day, each person in the family can choose a topic and we talk about it. And I'm not saying you have to be a dictionary and know everything and all the words, but it's just to create conversation and just to establish, to get that vocabulary, to develop skills like that auditory closure and auditory association, which is, the closures, those predictable and unpredictable sentences. So, when you, for example, if you keep reading familiar books or they know familiar nursery rhymes or songs, they can complete those words or those sentences that they hear. They know the end of it, like at school, when you take out and then they know it's books.
Why would they need a skill like that?
Well, I think in terms of learning predictability and closure, well, it's to complete, I think it's just to pull all that data together. So, if you don't have that closure ability, it'll impact your memory, it'll impact your sequencing skills, your ability to follow instructions. So really, it's pulling all the strings together. And if we don't have all, like I mentioned, if you don't have all that data, the attention, the sensitivity, the awareness, the closure, your ability to associate, so link words that go together with categories, then processing the smallest unit, which is sound, will be very difficult for children. So then if those children don't have those previous skills in place, then pulling it together to be able to read and spell will be tricky. So there is a sequence. And that's why Raeesa was saying, certain ages, certain skills have to be acquired. And if there aren't, and there's gaps,
then it will affect their ability to learn as it gets to grade 1.
Exactly. So there's lots of things you can do, like I mentioned, but the talking and the reading are easy to do, but obviously play is important. So bring in the musical chairs, bring in the Simon Says, box of random items to remember. So if you had to, collect household items, put them on the table, the child has to remember what they are. So the vocabulary around it and the sequence of those things. So that's, and that's how you remember information. So in the classroom situation, when you have to remember instructions or stories, you can't just remember it in any old order. There's an order to things. So it's important that that message is unpacked appropriately in order for you to understand it. So chain games are great. So as well for memory. So where you can also do around the supper table, I went to the shop and I bought, and then you keep adding to the list. Where you can do rhyme chains as well. So I say cat, you say rat, and then you keep adding to that chain. Also exposure to just going for a nice quiet walk in the park or the garden, and hearing the sounds and discussing the sounds that we hear, and where they are, and same around the house. If you had, like I mentioned, that game that you can play, it was on the radio where it was guess the sound, but then the child's blindfolded and they have to guess what household item it is and what intensity it's at. Is it loud? Is it soft? So it's endless. We can carry on. I can give you lots more.
See the passion.
Yeah.
Then talking about the play, Tracy, then how does the impact or play have an impact on the child's development when it comes to the auditory and then visual?
Okay, so as Raeesa mentioned, play is the work of a child. So we say to our children, your job at school is to play.
I don't know if parents would be happy with that.
Well, I always say to parents at the beginning of the year that if your child comes home and says, I did nothing except play, we've achieved our goal for the day. So that, as she was talking about incidental learning, so that whole thing of having a set of blocks, and we all know with a baby that when they start building blocks, they put one block on top of the other, and they get feedback from mom and dad. Oh, you're so clever, you've put that on top.
Success.
You're developing vocabulary, you're developing spatial skills. The child goes, I've done something good, let me see if I can do that again. They then put a third block on. Then they knock the block over and everybody goes, yay. And we need to continue that. We can't stop that when the baby becomes a toddler. And through that incidental play of being exposed to a variety of toys.
And the Tupperware cupboard?
And the Tupperware cupboard is absolutely brilliant for a host of different things. Children are learning incidentally, but the role of the parent there and the role of the nursery school is to take that incidental learning and give it meaning.
Okay.
So that whole thing about language, about spatial skills, about incentives for doing something, children play naturally. And if they get given the correct things to play with, be it a Tupperware cupboard, a set of blocks, not necessarily, I mean, there is place for the little electronic dog that just yaps. But really, what else can that little electronic yapping dog do? Not a lot compared to a set of blocks or a set of manipulatives that they can build to create something that is their own. A rectangular block can be a fire engine. It can be a house. It can be a window in a house. It can be a person. And that encourages the child's creativity. And as you said earlier, that creativity and connection and that collaborative kind of thing that we need as adults. We're teaching those skills, and children are learning those skills through playing with a set of blocks.
So it's really a guided approach to teaching a child to learn from a nursery school perspective.
And I think we look at the cherry on the top, the roof of the house is the ability to learn. But all those developmental blocks that make up the structure or the stability of that house are the developmental skills, the visual perceptual skills, auditory perceptual skills, sensory systems, gross motor skills, fine motor skills. It's all of those little individual structures that let us have a child get to 7 years old to be able to read, to write, to do maths. And I think we get to that point of my child now needs to be 7 years old and needs to be able to read and write and spell.
Fundamentally ready
to
do that.
Absolutely. But have we put all these pillars in place so that we can put the I'm ready to learn on the top? Absolutely. And if one of those is a little bit wobbly, that ready to learn
experience the difficulties
is a little bit more wobbly. Absolutely. And I think that concept of each individual pillar, it doesn't work in isolation. So it's not just auditory perceptual skills. It's not just visual perceptual skills. It's not just gross motor skills or fine motor skills. It's how do these all work together? And I think a nice example of this is, when you're driving and you've come to somewhere new and you want to find the house or the places where you need to get to, why is it so automatic that we turn down the radio when we want to look? And I think that's a nice example of understanding how the brain takes in sensory information, perceptual information. We're using our eyes and our ears at the same time, but I need to take it more from my eyes, so I'm going to switch off one of my sensory systems. And it's not that one is weak or stronger than the other. It's I know I'm using one better than the other because that's the one I need. And when we get to kids doing things like spelling, maths, reading, we need them to be drawing on multiple of skills.
And if they don't have those blocks, they can't draw on it.
That's it. We can't say, okay, hang on, I need my memory skills now, but it's failing me, and I need to spell a word, and I learned it last night, and I knew it last night, and now in my test I can't produce the word, or in my story writing I can't produce the word. Why? Which pillar was wobbly? Which pillar am I not drawing on well enough?
So then a child is learning to write, let's say for argument's sake in grade 1, and that's a difficulty. So asking a parent to just practice, let's for example, the letter C at home over and over again is not going to help the child whose skills are missing from the age of 2.
That's it. And I love this example of handwriting, because handwriting is an output. It's taking lots of different skills to produce something with your body. So you need to integrate so many skills. So if you think of, let's see, writing the letter D, for example, I need to form it backward, not top down. That's telling me about my midline crossing, my directionality. So do I understand that things go top down, left to right, anti-clockwise? When I'm writing, I'm using my body. So do I have a strong core? Am I completely hanging and hinging on the table to be able to write?
Online, we saw many of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Or are my fingers weak? My hands aren't strong enough, or my shoulders aren't strong enough. So it's actually really hard for me to grip that pencil. And now I'm putting in so much effort to hold the pencil that I know what the letter D looks like, but it's so hard for me to draw it. And it's taking all my energy because my hands are a little bit more weaker. Or I don't have the perceptual understanding of where my fingers are in space. So I've actually got to keep looking at what my fingers are doing to be able to write the letter. Or actually, I know I have to write the letter D, but by the time I've looked at the board and I've looked at my page, now it looks like my mind has told me it's a B. So now I've reversed it because my spatial system and my integration system is a little bit immature, because maybe I didn't build too many puzzles when I was younger. Maybe I didn't place
construction blocks.
Maybe I didn't practice the skill enough. So I'm struggling to now integrate it to something as complex as handwriting. So just writing the letter over and over again is going to be more challenging.
Just putting a plaster on what the problem could be, the difficulty.
Absolutely.
Okay. You mentioned earlier on gross motor and fine motor. What are the differences between those two?
So your gross motor skills refers to your large muscles of your body. So how my core works, do I have a good core, do I have good balance, and how I use the big muscles of my body. Can I jump, hop, walk, sit, stand? Those are gross motor skills, and we generally tend to look at milestones. So has my child rolled at a certain age, got a head control at a certain age, crawled, big one is crawling, many children skipping, crawling, and then we see later fine motor related difficulties, unfortunately. And also talking about visual perception, crawling is so important for visual perception, because when you little babies on their all fours and getting under and around things,
bumping
into things, they're learning about their body, and they're seeing the world from a whole new perception, a different angle. So kids who skip crawling often have midline crossing related issues, and then they don't integrate what we call reflexes. So if you look at a little baby when they come out, they're full of reflexes. They move by reflexes. So if you put your finger in their hand, they will squeeze. If you turn their head, they will move to the side. If you put them upside down, they will come up. And it's all to develop natural movement. And you only develop natural voluntary movement through play. Experiences, that's exactly it. So as little as kids are, and that refers to their gross motor skills. So then obviously as they get older, we integrate their gross motor skills. So it's not just now walking, it's can you jump, can you hop, can you use the left side of your body different from the right side of your body? And again, that's important, because if I'm understanding at 2 years old that my left and right side moves differently, when I get to 8 years old that I need to do maths, and I need to integrate
tens and units,
or I need to understand in my head that 2 and 4, and I have to visualize it. It's going back to when I actually understand my body to be able to be doing when I was much younger. So those are gross motor skills. Fine motor skills are specific to your hands. So what do my hands do? And if you think about it, how do we engage with our environment? We use our hands. So the first thing that influences fine motor skills is your sensory development. What do I feel and touch? So if I'm not playing in the sand, not cooking with mom, not putting my hands in cake batter, I'm not playing with shaving cream, I'm not playing with are not on the grass, and I love those videos where you see mums put the kids on the grass and their legs go all the way up and think, oh, you need lots of sensory input. So you first experience the world through texture, through touch, how things feel.
Because I mean, there are children that don't like the touch. We watch it at school, the touch of glue or paint.
And if we think about it, that's the very bottom of our learning pyramid, is the sense of touch. How does something feel? And it's very linked to feeding, but that's a different topic altogether. So children need to know how things feel to be able to develop their precision skills, their writing, grip, grasps, and you can't have good fine motor skills if you don't have good gross motor skills.
So you need these to be developed.
Absolutely. And if I want to use my hand here, I need to make sure my wrist, my elbow, my shoulder, and my core is well supported. And it's as easy as if I take my feet off the ground now to balance on this chair, and I take my back off the rest, I immediately engage my core. If you're asking a child to do a fine motor activity and their core is weak and they can't engage their core, how are we expecting them to write, to color, to paint? If their core is not strong, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be more difficult.
And the output, I'm sure, will be slower.
The output can be slower. The quality of the output is more challenging. And then the most important thing is the energy that goes into that. You're draining the energy. Instead of attention and learning, you're putting far too much energy into what my body is trying. I'm trying to keep my body upright to be able to learn.
So instead of learning, all your energy and kind of focuses on just trying to stay straight.
And then your auditory perceptual skills go out the window.
Because you don't have the energy for that.
100%. So it affects your attention and your focus.
Oh, so and we've heard that. I mean, many parents, I've heard over the years, is that there's so many teachers saying that the children have difficulties with attention. And while there's so many schools saying that my child is an attention deficit, but it's not necessarily that. It could be the auditory.
Exactly, a combination of factors.
Okay, so maybe not just because they are busy people, but because there's something wrong with the auditory side or the vision.
You know, we were talking about play, and play being a child's work. And if we think of dividing your day into hours, 24 hours in a day, and if you say, okay, say a child is sleeping for 8 hours, and we look at other aspects of a child's life, but 8 hours of work should be play. Do our kids get 8 hours of play? Do kids under 7 years old, I actually want to say under 12, but under 7, get 8 hours of play? What is their work is play. And when we say play, what types of play are they doing?
Not necessarily on a screen.
That's exactly. And I think if we look at the percentage of those 8 hours, what percentage of kids are sitting in front of the screen? And when you're sitting in front of a screen, what brain systems, what developmental systems are we activating? You're doing nothing for the child's body.
Definitely not for the ears, because you're just watching.
You're taking in a 2D image. You're not doing anything for language. You're not doing anything for their problem-solving system. They're just being fed whatever it is. So that would be greatly disadvantaging those building blocks that we are putting forward for children to be able to learn.
Okay. And then I think, Tammy, with regards to, circumstances in the last couple of months, parents have had to make sacrifices themselves with regard to their own employment or occupations and working from home and trying to juggle all of that. And there are some parents who just couldn't afford to send their children to a nursery school or chose to keep them at home rather than the online. Coming back with the children coming back to the nursery school now, the impact of that with regards to playing with each other, being able to communicate effectively, the impact, what have you seen or noticed?
Yeah, I definitely think there've been a number of impacts. If you just look at what we've spoken about tonight and the skills that we as a nursery school intentionally develop in a child, and perhaps the exposure at home hasn't allowed for that. Perhaps the parents don't have the resources at home to practice these sorts of skills. And so we're finding that those gaps are absolutely growing. And so we are intentionally putting systems and plans and curriculum in place at school so that we can bridge those gaps now, so that it doesn't have an impact down the line
when they get to grade one.
When they get to grade one, absolutely.
All right, so there is a fundamental necessity, I would say, for what I'm hearing here, the need for a nursery school, because it's really structured and geared to helping a child develop those fundamental blocks. So by the time they get to grade 1, they're able to read and write. Without
Absolutely.
they end up needing support perhaps from an occupational or speech therapist, or maybe even a remedial therapist long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Kim, if I can interrupt there, if you think about Raeesa saying that children should be playing for 8 hours a day, if we look at our homes and the resources, as Tammy was mentioning, that we have at home, it's like being exposed to a library compared to the books that you have at home. You'll never have enough books at home to equate to an entire library. And the same thing goes for the toys and the things that we have at nursery school, which also our teachers are specifically trained to go into a place that's into a school supply store and say, that's what I need for the children to do this. And we have multiple construction toys, for example. We don't just have Lego blocks, which is always the go-to, and Lego blocks are great and Duplo blocks are even better, but they are expensive. So how many other options do you as a family or a parent have in exposing your children to things that have perhaps different textures, that are smaller or bigger, various sizes, colorful or not, possibly just plain wooden blocks, not necessarily colored blocks. Whereas in a nursery school environment, not only do you have the resources that are available, but you have the expertise of trained professionals. And I think that is the biggest thing. And one of the things that certainly when I was growing up, we didn't have a grade 000 or a grade 00. I went straight to grade 1. And the world was a very different place then.
They played and went for walks in the park.
And
society has changed. And now we understand, particularly those first 1,000 days of a child's life, how important development is and how important exposure to things is. So if you have a look in countries that have huge levels of poverty, those children are already disadvantaged, not just because of their nutrition or where the next meal is going to come from, but they're not exposed to a variety of things which give them the opportunity as they get older. And that's certainly one of the biggest things around sending a child to nursery school as part of the numerous, in fact, you can't even count the number of advantages there are to being at a nursery school from a young age, from the age of 3.
Social and emotional components of being other kids your age, how much kids have to learn from that. And then the independent skills that send kids to school from a younger age.
And we would also give parents an opportunity to see where their child is in relation to other children, not to say compare, because children are different, as you mentioned, but where they are in relation to children more or less the same age. That will also give them context, especially if there's children, if they're single or only children.
And if I can say, I think the school system also provides early intervention. At home, the parents aren't always going. So, a lot of parents do know their children very well, but they might not necessarily know what skills they need or what skills
they developmental.
Yes. So at least at school, we've got amazing teachers who are trained in these skills as well, and they can identify, this child's struggling with auditory perceptual skills, or this child's struggling with fine motor skills. They need help. And that's where the therapy can come in, as we can provide them with compensatory strategies and tools to develop those skills so that they can improve and then be able to read and write appropriately when it comes to that point. But I do think the school environment really is so important from that perspective.
Well, then Tammy and then Tracy, sure, parents would say, but let us give them a little bit of time, let them just mature, let them be exposed. Is it important to kind of put things into place from an early age, or do you give them the benefit of the doubt?
I think for me, what's really important is making sure that our children are settled. It's that emotional component that Raeesa was talking about, and ensuring that they're in a space to learn. If a child isn't settled, doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel loved, there's no point in going any further, kind of thing.
So and then
until we've got that foundation in place, and then learning can take place. So if I think particularly of like our 000s, we will absolutely give them time to settle in and make sure that emotionally they are feeling that love and that safe space before we start any form of assessment.
Okay.
Having said that, though, I think early intervention is best, because your neurological pathways are being developed from birth, from before birth, you know. And so if we can get children's pathways, I want to say corrected, I don't know if that's the right word to use. Rewired, there we go. If we can rewire them from young, the earlier we can do that rewiring, the better, because their initial years are so crucial under the age of 6 to get those neurological pathways triggering correctly and firing correctly. It's crucial that we can do that. We will obviously offer every support we can possible in the classroom, home programs, all of those sorts of things will be put in place. And we're not just, and I mean this respectfully, we're not just going to say, oh, you need to go to speech, oh, you need to go to OT. There's a process that we follow as a school, and I know that Tracy does the same at Ben's. But absolutely, that early intervention is crucial. And that's why nursery school is so important, because we get to pick those things up early. We get to get those neurological pathways wired correctly.
And if I can link it back to that concept of our house, our learning house, right? If we go 3 years, 4 years, pretend it's each floor of the house.
Okay.
And if I get to grade 1 and now, or grade 2 or grade 3, and now we're looking at helping the roof, we have to go back how many floors?
Okay.
But if we've picked it up on the first floor, we have less interventions to put into place. Our help may be a lot less than if we're starting so much later.
And then probably setting them up for success in grade 1 when they are ready to read.
And if I can also say that play is a way that children learn naturally. So it's not a forced thing. It's not like, oh, I've got to teach them how to put one block on top of the other. If you do that with a baby, for example, watching, they'll automatically start copying you. It happens very naturally. And working around other children of a similar age, because you're always going to have disparities in who's slightly more advanced to who's not. Children learn a lot from each other. Repetitive play cements those skills. So the more opportunity we give those children to play, practice. And so that's the other thing about school being really important, because we give them those opportunities repeatedly to play and to achieve success, so that they can then develop the next level.
I mean, I have heard parents say, I'm not sending my child to nursery school because it's an institution. But if it's going to be structured in the manner in which I've heard this evening, they're going to school to play and then learn. And then learn to read and write when they get to grade 1. It's not necessarily an institution. Okay. That child that doesn't want to go to school, that child's got a sore tummy, or the child that's scared. What kind of things, where would that be coming from? Tammy or Tracy?
So what Tammy was talking about a child feeling settled. So the nursery school that your child attends needs to be one that has nurture for a start. It's absolutely critical. If you have teachers who do not connect with children, and again, we're talking about connections, collaborations, all that kind of thing. If teachers don't connect with children are not going to feel part of the school. They need to feel included. They need to feel like they belong. So being nurtured, having a sense of belonging. And often with children, we talk about week 3 and things have been great. They've come to school, everything's great. And mom goes, well, I was expecting my child to weep, because of course mom wept. And the child doesn't cry. And then suddenly on the 3rd week, the child is a little bit resistant, and then because now they're starting to realize each day there's going to be a new challenge. Maybe I don't feel quite ready for that, but if the teacher is welcoming, if the teacher includes the child into something, if the teacher makes sure that child feels loved and safe, that's going to help the child to feel like they can learn.
So we're just going to love them to sort time and
love them.
Okay.
I always say to parents when I'm doing a school tour, that our teachers are mommies first to your children, and that I think it's exactly that loving and nurturing, making sure that your child feels secure. That is our first port of call as teachers, is to ensure that that's in place.
I think as a mom myself, is that you want them to love your child when you're not there.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do.
We do have a question from one of our viewers, so I'm going to ask Debbie if she doesn't mind just posing it for us to the panel.
Absolutely. Good evening, and what a wonderful, wonderful discussion. I wish I was part of it. But anyway, one of the questions that's come through is obviously with the pandemic that we've had, children have missed out on schooling? And do the schools have plans of action in terms of getting the gaps that the children have had, giving them time to catch that up in terms of their development? And I know that we do.
Should I jump in?
Jump in.
Go, Tammy.
Thank you for the question, Debbie. So this lovely lady over here is actually part of our plan at what we do in a KPNS. It's a perceptual program called Look, Listen, Learn. And Raeesa and speech therapist, Karen, who has been they've both been part of the school system for many years. My mandate to them a couple of years ago was work yourself out of a job, create a program for me from the age of triple naught through to grade naught, create a program for me that puts all of these skills that we're talking about in place. They've practiced both the auditory, the visual, we do them as separate, but then we also integrate them because that's key for learning in years to come. And so can't
be done in isolation.
No, can't be done in isolation. And so that's exactly what this program that Raeesa and Karen have put together for us, that's what it does, is that it lays those foundations, it grades it in an age appropriate manner. And I think that really for us is going to be really filling the gaps that we're picking up.
And sorry,
now I was going to say, I don't know if you want to add anything about the program.
I just want to say that it's play-based.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Play, age-appropriate activities for kids. And we've really just looked at what are we seeing? What are we seeing in society? What are we seeing in the kids that are coming through our doors in terms of needing help? Okay. And we're saying, okay, these are the skills that we find kids are struggling with.
Yeah.
And how can we implement it in a fun, age-appropriate, playful way so that kids develop these kind of skills?
Yeah.
Okay, so does the program, would you be able to kind of, I suppose, grade it up or down with the difficulties that have come from last year, now, and maybe going into next year?
Yes, absolutely. That's
Okay.
actually something we had to do with COVID.
Yes.
Because when we started the program, we started before we hit COVID.
Okay.
We designed it before we hit COVID. So that's definitely something we had to relook at. And we actually started to see a few more challenges because of COVID and online learning and stopping school. So we had to go back and revise the program to be able to.
And I think that will help parents knowing that the program will be designed for where our children are at now.
Yes.
And that's something that I wanted to say is that I know that a lot of parents are very concerned about the impact of the pandemic on our children's learning.
Long term as well.
Yeah.
But one of the things we need to remember is that in this case, we are all in the same boat.
Correct.
What is the paddle that we're using to row that boat might look slightly different for different children. So, but we are essentially all in the same boat. All the children have missed the same amount of school. If we average it out, there are some who stayed off longer. So that is one of the things to consider. And then again, because our teachers are experts in their field and they're professionals, they have identified the children who've got those
challenges,
bricks, those pillars that are a little bit wobbly, and they are working with smaller groups very intentionally in those specific skills, making sure that we start from the ground up and developing those skills for them.
I have another question, if
Thank
you don't mind. Sorry,
yes, no problem.
I think it's worth asking. The question is, has Kailani Schools Group ever considered offering open days for children to come and play at the school for the community? So not the children that are at the school already, but the community out there, just to help those children gain what they may be lacking at home. And is that something that we could possibly look at and think about?
Well, can I just jump in there? We have an open day, but for parents, they can bring their children. This Saturday for KPS, I know that Ben's
2nd of October for Ben's.
So, I mean, it's a perfect opportunity for parents just to come and have a look, see if they are curious. And that's a good question to ask Tammy or Tracy.
Yeah.
And the teachers that are there.
Yeah,
and absolutely. I certainly think it's something that we could look at. COVID protocols allowing.
Yes.
Because obviously the timing is for that question. If you'd asked us that question 2 years ago, we would have gone, great, what are we doing on Saturday?
When?
But under current protocols, it might take a little bit more structuring, a little bit more careful thought, but it's certainly something that we will consider.
And then in a nutshell, another question that's come through is, how important is it to start school before grade 0? Now, you spoke earlier about the fact that us old people only started school at grade 1 level. Nursery school was not something that we did. That's changed, and we touched on it. But how important is it? School fees are high. The developmental levy that parents have to put down is huge. So it's important. I know it's important. Let's make the parents understand how important it is.
I think that you can send a child to grade R formal schooling, but you need to make sure that house is strong. And as a parent, are you able to put the things into place to keep that house strong? Are you able to provide your child with a certain number of play activities, exposure activities,
auditory and social
activities? Yeah, absolutely. To be able to make sure they will cope at a grade for a learning level to start learning. And I think that's the most important thing. If a parent can confidently feel, in this day and age, when often most parents both are working and have lots of other commitments, not just one child to look after, are you able to confidently say that my child, without having any preschooling exposure, will be okay at a grade R level?
That's a fair answer.
And I think also it could be quite challenging because I think the schooling system has also changed so much. So it's a lot more pressurized and complex than it was all those years ago. So, and then again, if there are difficulties, that could hinder exactly how they're going to be identified. Are they going to get support? And are they going to be able to cope when they go into grade R? So I think it's an interesting one.
Yes, and parents, I mean, we saw this online last year in particular. Mom and dad are both trying to do their job, and you got a child on a digital device, and moms or dads trying to help them with their work, and the stress and anxiety that was building up in the house and the emotional fallout. It was tough on parents.
And again, that's what I was talking about, that whole emotional development as well as social development. So one of the intentional programs that we started at Ben's this year was an intentional emotional development program. So previously, children learned emotional skills. They learned how to identify, I'm feeling sad because, not just I'm feeling sad. So we've had to go all the way back again and deal with each of those basic emotions in detail through role play, through puppet workshops, through all sorts of things, explaining how do you see, because of course now we're also wearing masks, how do you see that somebody's sad? Because now you can't see them out necessarily, but we talk about their body language, etc., etc. So it's been about identifying those emotions and how to deal with those emotions and how to regulate your own emotions, because that is really critical for learning as well.
I see that we're just about up with time. So one more question.
Yes, one more question. I believe that there's a chance that, considering the fact that we realize COVID has hurt parents in terms of financial, being able to earn the money that they used to earn, I believe that there might be some kind of deals that we're thinking about in terms of that for our parents. Tammy, could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So something that we've really been working on is the developmental levy. We understand that that's a substantial amount of money, particularly under the current circumstances, to be asking parents to lay out at this point. And so we've restructured that developmental levy so that at nursery school level, the amount that is payable is a smaller amount and a more manageable amount. And so the community is going to hear about that in the next day or two. But I really think that that's going to enable parents, make it easier for parents and less of a barrier to enter our nursery schools.
This sounds exciting.
Yeah, very excited about it.
Before we come to the end of this lovely conversation, I do want to say thank you to each and every one of you here. Thank you so much for joining us. And just helping our parents understand kind of the context of the nursery school setting, and that we're going to help the little ones that have had difficulties. If there are any other questions that have been posed online, they will be answered by email. So just for the parents at home. And then we just want to encourage you to watch Tracy Newman. There's a talk on their website for Ben's about play. So if you're interested in that and you want to explore and see more about the play that Tracy was talking about.
It's a very practical talk on how to play with your child. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but a lot of parents don't know how to start to play with their child. So it's very practically based.
Thank you. And then I know that on this coming Monday, Tammy, there's a talk that you have.
Yes, so we, Raeesa and Karen, who's not with us this evening, we're going to be doing, well, they're going to be presenting more, really just taking a deeper dive into perceptual skills and what are the connections between nursery school skills and the impact, and where do we see them develop and used at a grade 1 level, for instance. So really joining those two dots as to how crucial they are and what parents can be doing practically. It's going to be a very practical talk on how parents can support the development of those perceptual skills at home.
And how do parents get an opportunity to view this or be part of this?
So what we can do is after this webinar, we can email, we've got all of the email addresses, and we can email the link for that. It will also be a Zoom webinar. There's no need to register. It will literally just be a case of clicking on the link on Monday at 7:30 and joining us. Yeah, 7:30 in the evening.
Sounds wonderful. So thank you very much. May you all enjoy well, at least it's Friday tomorrow. May you have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.